They're not only far more democratic, they're far more, make more sense in it because they have some built-in humanity. It is easier to go and claim someone else's system and install it in your country than to look back and see, I had a system before these people got there. Let's see if that system has anything to offer me. One of the main reasons why African civilization was destroyed by whites deliberately, so that you can forget what you were before they came, is they must install a system that makes you dependent on them. Another reason it wasn't reclaimed by our intellect, because most of our intellects are intellectually lazy, and because they were trained by Europeans, they're afraid to challenge the Europeans who trained them, and they're afraid to contradict them. What we have to do in the long run is to sit down and take a look at where we went wrong, not only in claiming our civilization, but claiming our revolutionary heritage. That was another thing worthy of being called a civilization. We have been in revolt longer, more consistent than any people on the face of the earth. Why are we cringing after people who came out of a thawed-out icebox in Europe shooting babies in the back? If we were brave enough in the Caribbean islands to launch a series of slave revolts that lasted over 100 years, the same thing in the United States, then in Africa, anti-colonial revolts that outgeneraled some of the finest minds of Europe, and we have good reports on this. One of the best reports came from a young English reporter named Winston Churchill. There's a book called The River Wall, dealing with the British reconquest of the Sudan. Why haven't we made the best use of religion, and why haven't we made some separation of the revolutionary content of the religions of Africa? Why haven't we looked at the black side of Islam? Because most Muslims, I don't know a single black scholar who is a Muslim who is a scholar of Islam. No, you want to understand what I said. No. I don't know a single black scholar who is a Muslim who is a scholar of Islam. I know a bunch of blacks who are Arabists and following that bunch of degenerates as though they were a people. And they were slave traders before Islam, and they still are. Most of the enslavers of children. I have never seen a single black who is a Muslim who would dare discuss the invasion of the Western Sudan in 1591 and the exiling and the destruction of the great scholars at the University of St. Khoury at Timbuktu, and most of these scholars were Muslim, including the greatest of them all, Ahmed Baba. Won't discuss it. Won't talk about it. This destruction from North Africa by the Arabs against the African Muslims in the Western Sudan, Muslim against Muslims, made it possible for the slave trade to spread inland. After 1600, Africa's doomed was a sealed and delivered fact. Because in North Africa, you had the last aspect of the Ottoman Empire, the Mamelukes. In East Africa, you had the Arab slave trade and the Portuguese meeting the Arab slave, forming a partnership, destroying African civilizations there. In West Africa, you had the Portuguese and the Spanish and subsequently the British. In inner West Africa, you had a destruction coming from the north, led by the Arabs and mercenary soldiers from Spain and parts of Europe. Later in South Africa, you had the Boers, and the Boers subsequently pushed the Africans who had originally welcomed them. Then the British came and pushed the Boers pushed the Zulus pushed back. Now you got wars all over Africa, and these wars are in destruction of African civilizations. You got Muslim revolutionaries that most Muslims know nothing about. Muhammad bin Abdullah Hassan in Somaliland fought for over 20 years, pushed the British out of Somalia. Muhammad Ahmed of the Sudan, called the Mahdi, who literally drove the British out of the Sudan. It is the reconquest of the Sudan that Churchill wrote about in the River War. I feel myself getting warm and feeling more like a Baptist as I grew up in, so I got to find a way to taper this thing off now. Even without encouragement. I'm a Baptist preacher who never made it to the pulpit and an entertainer who never made it to the stage. There's so much to say here because this is a critical time in our history. We have had so many golden opportunities we threw to the wind. We're very kind to our enemies. We've made no critical analysis of those among us who we should put on trial. I have worked most of my life digging up information on black heroes, men and women. I know of the black reprobates. I'd like to one day be free enough now to write a book about the great black reprobates of history, fakers, and I'd like to write a good book on Tebow Tibb, the East African black slave trader who said he was a contract laborer, or maybe he was. I'd like to write a history on the great black fakers, Prester John and all his imitators. I'd like to write history of some of the blacks who masqueraded as foreigners, who passed themselves off as kings, who were bastard children of bastard children. I'd like to know write the real story of Haile Selassie. So I'm not trying to sweep all of our bad boys under the rug. And I don't want to get no white people off the hook either. I wish black people would read a book called The Story of the Missionaries in Conquest. Stop getting so dewy-eyed over the religion some people, the missionaries did teach them to read, yeah. The missionaries made the maps to show the soldiers how to take the country. The real story about the war in Uganda. What I'm saying is that I see no solution for African people, right or left, except some form of Pan-African nationalism. I've been a socialist most of my life, and I see no other intelligent way for man to live except in caring societies. And I don't necessarily have to go to Europe to get my socialism or my socialist example or my Christianity, because it's as old as functioning societies. I don't think the European character is capable of practicing socialism, democracy, or Christianity. I don't think communism failed. I think the communists failed. I don't think Christianity is a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea in the hands of the Europeans who are totally incapable of practicing it. We were practicing it all along without calling it any name. They had to formalize it, dogmatize it, then use it as a rationale to enslave other people. I'm a spiritualist myself, and I believe in the spirituality of people. I have studied the world's major organized religions, and all of them has been used as a rationale to enslave people. So therefore I belong to none of them and endorse none of them, and don't feel the need for any of them. Man was closer to God, whoever he or she was, before they were organized. The African tried to bring man in harmony with nature, while the European tried to defy nature. The spiritual force of the universe was everywhere, including inside of you. You didn't have to go to the church. If the spiritual force was in the water, you could stand by the water and pray. Now, I maintain that if I decide to sit in my bathroom, I'd go in my bathroom and pray. I don't dislike churches, I dislike fakery. You have to say something. I think because we have undercounted ourselves and underestimated ourselves, we've quite forgotten that we were never a minority. As 1 billion African people on the face of the earth, we can create industries overnight if we decided that we don't wear no underwear we don't make. We don't eat no food that don't come from one of our farms. We don't sleep on no mattresses we don't make. We don't bury our loved ones in any coffins we don't make. We take the coffin industry away from the mafia. We've forgotten our great potential as a people. When you want to destroy a people, you take away their self-confidence in the image of God as they originally conceived him or her to be. I have no problem with the her. If you got a problem with her, then you got a Western hang-up, because we created the her. Rites can't deal with the culture unity of Africa. The female God did us no harm. If you've been listening to Hollywood and all the bad movies, then you might think her is somebody with a whip. There was a humane input into our lives based on our consideration of the possibility that while the female's life was different from ours, but it was equal in importance. So therefore we had no problem in making the female gods. Now in the final analysis, and I'm going to try to end it here because I don't know end things very well anyway. All I'm asking you to is not only to reclaim our civilization, but reclaim yourself. Reclaim your community. Reclaim your family. Reclaim your children. I'm asking you to talk to each other again. Sit down again. Have dinners and breakfasts with each other again. Praise your children. If they got a problem, what can I do for you? If they talk to you, they wouldn't have to take it to the street. But if they can't take it to you, if they can't talk to you, talk to your mate. If you got one, you haven't got one, there's one out there who wants somebody. Find one. Everybody needs somebody, a personality to massage another personality to stimulate growth. And a person who stands alone sometimes is not growing, not developing. Somewhere in the march of life, we made a wrong turn at a fork in the road. We read the signboards of history wrong. We have to go back to that fork of the road and see what signboard points to us. There are many interpretations of where we should go. My personal interpretation, you can take it for what it's worth, is that there is no lasting solution that leaves out Pan-African nationalism, and that our socialism would come under that umbrella if we want it. Our communism can come under that umbrella if we want it. And that we have to take into consideration that Africans did not create the nation state as we see it. That's a European concept of a state. Africa created the territorial state, cluster states coexisting. We have to claim those things that make us comfortable with each other. We have to stop worrying about whether anyone else approves of it or not. When this began to happen, when we began to care about our community, our children, our home, when we began to make our churches creative and productive, I will assume that we have read those signboards at the fork of the road properly, that we have at last found that sign that says Pan-African nationalism, and then we'll be on our way home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clarke. I know some of you are leaving, but before you do, we have a couple of things we want to ask you to do for us. The series that we're trying to put together, we want to make a special appeal for your support materially. Some of you have already paid the $3 coming in, but we want to ask you to make a special contribution to pay some expenses for at least one of the speakers from today's event, as well as some of the activities that will be coming up in a few weeks. We are working with Brother Richard Green on a series for the African History Month. It will be called the Maurice Bishop Malcolm X Lecture Series, four-part series which we hope will be held here on consecutive Thursdays or Fridays. We haven't decided yet. We have to work out some logistical things with the center and some other events that are happening around the city, including the series that's done by the Patrice Lumumba Coalition in Harlem at the Harriet Tubman School, which this coming Friday is, you should get a flyer. It's going to be on a comparative analysis on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. The title of it is Dr. King, Nonviolence and the Struggle for National Liberation in the Age of the Post-Cold War Era. And there are a number of speakers, including Daruba Ben-Wahad, Dr. James Garrett, Father Lucas Ilombe, and many others. And we hope you turn out for that one. We have some people who are passing around. We ask you to be generous. They say freedom isn't free. We do have a lot of work to do, and we trust that you will contribute to their requests. Also, in our audience, we have a brother who has been doing this kind of work. I want to give him about 5 or 6 minutes to share some notes with you, some thoughts. Brother who is a longtime Garveyite. He's not as young as he might think or looks. I speak of Dr. Anderson Thompson. I want to invite him up here for a few minutes to share some thoughts with us along the same lines of what we've been talking about. Dr. Thompson.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Hotep brothers and sisters. I'm more than happy to be with you this weekend here in the African community of New York City. It's been quite a blessing to have spent the past 5 to 6 days with Professor Clarke, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Professor James Smalls. It's indeed been my pleasure to have spent this time in the city. I'd just like to report to you some of the things we're doing in the city of Chicago. We have finally brought together at least 25 Pan-African nationalist organizations, and we've put together a calendar which establishes what we will be doing from now to the year 2020. We've established 2020 as the 100th anniversary of the activity that took place in 1920, August 1st to the 31st, when the Universal Negro Improvement Association, under the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, met for more than a month during the month of August here in New York City at Madison Square Garden, with at least more than 25,000 people attending one of the sessions. So we feel that it's most important that we follow the path of Pan-Africanism with at least 4 basic principles. The first one being the primacy of Africa. The second one being the idea of regional economics, which of course many of our founding antecedents have given us master plans, from Paul Cuff to David Walker to Denmark Vesey to Henry Highland Garnett and Martin Delaney. Henry Highland Garnett, as I said before, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, Edward W. Blyden, moving us to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and all the way up to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So we've had a tradition that we have been attempting to follow with those master plans. And the idea of a United States of Africa going into the 21st century is not a new idea, but one that should be followed, and we're trying to follow that path here in this country. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to you in this brief moment. And once again, Africa is going to be free under the banner of one God, one aim, one destiny. Thank you very much.
I want to invite Professor Scobie back to the podium as we prepare for our questions and answers. I want to ask you to save your dissertations for another location. Just keep your questions real brief. Professor Clarke is here, and we'll be entertaining questions from the audience. Is there a platform, a podium, a mic? The document we talked about? Let's see, if you were to attend the function of the Harriet Tubman School next Friday, we'll have copies available. How's that, Ilombe? Okay. Our speakers have reassembled. This is kind of awkward because the podium is in the way. You can direct your questions to either one or all, and we'll try to get the microphone over to them to avoid walking back and forth. So we'll take the first question from over here. You can ask from where you are.
Peace, love. I'd like to ask Dr. Clarke exactly what is going on in Somalia from your perspective. What led up to this, to the chaos that we see, and what are some are there any solutions, any viable solutions to the problem?
What is going on in Somalia is Muslim clans playing the fool, some Arab-oriented, some African-oriented, have put the country in a position for Westerners using a pretense of stopping hunger can set in motion the process for the European reconquest of Africa. Westerners don't give a damn about hunger. There are people hungry in this country. There are white people hungry as well as black. They're not feeding them. It is a pretense, and it is something we won't deal with. Arab fundamentalism. The African who's a Muslim, who's black, have to fight for the right to be an African and also be a Muslim. The Sudan is really black, but sometimes for survival reasons, these blacks have to call themselves Arabs and act like the Arabs. What's going on is the process, because Africans played the fool and destroyed their early governments to all these silly coups engineered by white people. They weakened all African governments to the point where Europeans can knock them over. The Europeans have now set in motion where they can knock them over one by one. You're not going to believe this, but I'm absolutely sincere when I said it. They intend to commit genocide in Africa to the extent that Africa can be populated by Europeans and Asians. And there's a whole lot of people you think are our friends will be helping them do it. That's what's going on in Africa. A Holocaust 100 times worse than anything you've ever heard about.
Dr. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, my friend. You stated that the Caribbeans and the Africans could not get together, and that those who were educated by the Europeans had some kind of conflict confronting the Europeans.
Yes, still do.
And it seems to pose what they call the crisis of the African intellect, both male and female.
It's a crisis of the African intellect the world over.
When did the crisis start?
I didn't hear you now.
When did the crisis start?
When did the crisis start?
Yeah, just leave our crews out.
You mean time?
Yeah.
I think the crisis really started, well, in Jamaica, I think it started about the second half of the 19th century when the Jamaican mulattoes tried to make a deal with England for special privileges, and when England did not give them that deal, some of the mulattoes joined the blacks And some of the mulattoes became spies among the blacks. And gradually, Jamaica, England, seeing what's happening, made Jamaica the most stratified nation along color and economic lines of all the countries in the Caribbean. I think among us, it started along about the same time with fraternities and the brown bag societies and blue vein societies. And you see, this is something we don't even talk about, don't want to talk about. The white man do not accept his offspring. And the offspring is not comfortable with us. He can go to his white father's house and knock on the door, he can't get in. They have to make up their mind. Either they come in our house and stay or go out and stay. Or if they go out, they got no damn place to stay. This is something we won't even talk about. Now, I'll admit some of our finest leaders, some of our finest patriarchs have come from that class. Some of our most confused people also come from that class and still are in that class. Then I also admit that some of the blackest of the blacks have also been traitors. So the idea of being a traitor is not monopolized by any one class. But we fail to confront, we are mystified by European technology, European knowledge, to the point where we won't just confront him and say, a lot of this is bunk and junk. The world did not wait in darkness for you to bring the light. And most of the world, where you came, you put out the light. We won't say this. I heard a speech by Farrakhan. Some sister was kind enough to send it to me. And what he's buying the curse of Ham. And a lot of people think that was a part of the Bible. That was enforced on the Bible. He deal with skin again and nappy hair. Good hair is the hair that your mother and father gave you to survive what nature put you down. To be against your hair and your skin is an affront to your mother and father. I may have not answered your question, but we are in a dilemma of our survival based on someone else's values. But that's as close to it as I can get in anyway.
There's a chair right behind you.
That's it.
It's right here.
The what now?
What do you think about the holiday Kwanzaa?
That's it.
I think the holiday Kwanzaa is a good idea. Basically good. I think the alleged developer of Kwanzaa is a clever faker, a fraud, who took an African harvest ceremony, put some Swahili words to it, and called it his own. I didn't say he was dumb now. I say he was clever. I also said he was a clever faker. I'm saying it public so he can sue me. I know I'm in Brooklyn. He has a large following in Brooklyn. I said his loyalty to us is highly questionable. Who is his master is highly questionable. His role with the Panthers and killing Panthers and getting away with this is highly questionable. His mutilization of black women is not highly questionable because it's provable. He mutilized black women, went to jail, and all the women in his harem, and he's got more than one, are almost white. So he got a color problem too. All right, go ahead with Kwanzaa. Whatever you want to do. You need to have a special holiday. Easter's a pagan holiday, so is Christmas. You need to replace all of them.
Okay. I just want the records to reflect that Dr. Clarke said those things, right?
And don't give a damn. Yeah.
Do I approve? Yes, indeed.
Prove or not prove, doesn't matter. And I think, look, for 500 years the world has been ruled by white nationalism. Even when the Russians and the United States were pretending they were enemies, they were in bed together. I think African people need to help African people wherever they are on the face of this earth.
You got another question?
Yeah. Second question, sister. You talked about the importance of family. Could you talk about outside influences that have affected the family so that they cannot function in the best way they should?
The smallest unit.
Give it a mic, please.
The smallest unit of society is the family. The smallest unit within the family is the individual. So, what the family becomes is a group effort of what the individual. The individual are the components that make up the family unit. If that is a functioning unit, there's an interdependency that supports growth, and at the same time, in that process of supporting growth, it promotes independency. When families don't function properly, it fails to support and it does not develop independency. What it does is it may foster a particular mode of development that will continue to create a dependency either on members of that immediate unit, meaning the family structure, or intervention from without. The problem that happens with African families is that they do not, in most cases, and I'm speaking now in America, everybody exists within a social structure that is at least European. And the notion of family comes from that European cultural formation. Africans have family structures that go beyond and against the formats of the European family. We are now hearing about extended families. That is within the last 10 years. But African survival in the West has been because of its retention of African family structures. As that has broken down, intervention from without has increased so that the dependency on individual components or family members has decreased. The dependency has increased on the external development of societal support systems, so that now we no longer have a grandmother, whether it is biological or one in which we endow the African presence, who becomes the African elder. Children are taken out of family structures and put into societal structures and are asked to go into those societal structures, prosper, and create another family structure, which has not been prepared for them, nor do they participate in the selection of it. Some of us have created our own families, but we have been participating in that process. When you don't participate in that process, then it is not, in that sense, an extended family. So I'm saying that in order for the family to be successful, the African family to be successful in the United States and perhaps outside of the United States, even in Africa, that each member has to endeavor to take it as his or her personal responsibility to be the healthiest person they can be. That's what I was saying at the end about this person that we finally concoct, that this person must represent the best physical representation of the best that we can imagine. And what we have to do is to create a milieu where the imagination is inspired by an actual knowledge of history and forged with some type of activity that makes us know we can do. And that becomes the formation of this person that we then give to whomever we interact with. And that is my answer to how we develop a strong family. I think that what is happening now is that we come together because of social needs, and we depend on each other to give to ourselves or us to give to someone else those deficiencies. I think we support the strengths and in the process minimize the deficiencies.
Professor Scobie, in the Berlin Conference in 1884, you talked about the colonization of Africa. Then you went on to talk about the cosmology and the anthropological principles that African people have that bring out their humanity, and by projecting this humanity to other people, it seems to be create their own demise. My question is, what do we have to do with that humanity or that humanness? How do we use that humanness and don't get into trouble with it? Because it seems to be a problem. Usually John says it's a naivety in all parts, but would you elaborate on that?
Yes, Dr. Clarke made the same point that I made about this humanity. So millions, and most of us would agree that there is that humanity. But what I want to say, like charity, humanity begins at home. And we must show this humanity to our peoples wherever they are. There's one thing I know, I'm going to say it, and I have been saying it for a long time, and I'm going to change. All of the countries of the world, there are two things that are important in the, what they call the modern technological, scientific world today. The one thing is the control of power. And when we talk about power, we're talking about money, corporations. That's what we're talking about. The other thing that's important is armies, standing armies. All countries in the world have standing armies, and they use our armies to protect themselves. It is unfortunate that the armies that we have in the recently, comparatively recently, independent African countries have been used against our people in coups. Those armies should be used in the same way, you know, that you remember during the time of Angola and Mozambique and so on, there were Cuban troops in Africa. And you know, one of the things that struck me very hard was the fact that South Africa was adamant, and in Namibia too, South Africa wanted those troops away. Do you know why? We all know why. Because they were beating the daylights out of those South African troops. We need a strong standing army, a strong standing air force, so that they don't make incursions into our country like Israel made into Uganda. We want these kind of strong armies to be able to go out and help our peoples wherever they are. The United States sends its armies everywhere, and they welcome it. They say, oh, they're doing a good thing, they're doing a bad thing. I'm against this thing of sending European armies, although they have only our people in those armies, our blacks. But they can, our blacks and Hispanics and whoever else, but they're controlled by the power structure. We need those armies, and you know something, those armies together would be able to keep alien forces from wanting to come and stay and take over Africa. What Dr. Clarke said is very, very true. Gerald Ford, when he whatever he was here for some short time, Gerald Ford said that if they lose control, it was the Cold War during that period, as we remember. If we lose control of Africa to the Russians, then our civilization is going to be destroyed. You know that? And I put it to you and to all of us here, there is not one European country that would not band forces together to take over Africa again and colonize Africa with their people and take over the relic. Because Africa, the continent, has every single thing those thieves wanted, and it still has every single thing those thieves want today. And they're not beyond doing it. Look at South Africa. How difficult it is to get those reformed Dutch or whatever you call them out of Africa. They have no right in Africa to control the toe of Africa. They should be removed from there. I'm in accordance with the PAC when I say that. It's a question of our land. It can be done. You know, sometime, years and years ago, I was asking questions during the 5th Pan-African Conference. I was there with Dudley Thompson, who is now an ambassador, Jamaican ambassador. I was at that conference in Manchester, and I was mesmerized. I was talking to Jomo Kenyatta at the time, asking questions. And this man with his burning eyes, looking at me and talking, I said, but Mr. Kenyatta, how are we going to get? You must remember that Africa was colonized at that time. We're talking about 1945. I was in the Royal Air Force uniform still with my wings and all of that. So was Dudley Thompson at the time. He said, I said, how are we going to take Africa back from these colonists? You know what? He looked at me and he smiled. And he put his hand on my head. You said, you're asking me how are we going to take Africa from them? And you're in a Royal Air Force uniform? Don't you know? I said to him, Mr. Kenyatta, I got the message. Dr. Azikwe said the same thing to me when I asked him a question about South Africa. I don't care what anybody said. It seems as us, of all the people on the face of this earth, we are the ones most afraid to die. I hope we will never die the way we're going on because we're afraid to die. If you love a cause, you're prepared to live for the cause. But if you can't live for the cause as well, some of us have to die for it. Garvey knew that. If we're talking about Marcus Isaiah Garvey today, he said we don't have our own army, we don't have our own air force, we don't have anything. We don't have our own banks, we don't have... There is a meeting now going to be held. They want leading up to the year 2000. It is called a Black Agenda. It's going to be held in Nigeria. And they're talking about their own banks. Get rid of the IMF. Drop the IMF. Have nothing to do with them. Drop the UN United Nations. Drop all these things. Have nothing to do with them. I am in favor of that. If those who want to come in, but they're going to help at our leadership, at our control, I am not saying that we do not have thieves and charlatans among us. These thieves and charlatans know what they're doing. But they've been put there as puppet heads. They've been put there for time immemorial. We've always had puppets who are willing to sell themselves for dirty pottage. They've always done it. And we are the ones who control them. They have thieves in our midst. Don't get me wrong when I talk about Europeans. We have. And these are the ones that are infected with the virus, the cancer, the AIDS of European nastiness. And these are the ones that we have to deal with as well in our midst. When we can deal with them, there will be no more of this kind of thing. When we, as a concerted force, in Haiti is a big example. One of the most glorious revolutions in the world was the Haitian Revolution. Jean-Jacques Dessalines must be turning in his grave to see what is happening. There's only, and it is the same kind of thing. People with the mentality of Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint may have been a great leader, but he was a very, very, very Frenchified black man. And that was his undoing. That is why they sent him to, he went to jail. They arrested him, clapped him in chains, put him on the Creole, and sent him to Jouet to jail. That's one of the reasons. Because he listened to them. And he went to them. When they summoned him at their headquarters, he went there. He had no right to go. You are controlling a country. And some people that you've just beaten the hell out of them, they're calling you. They come to you. Dessalines said he wouldn't have gone unless he went with 3,000 of his troops. And if they didn't come out, if they didn't see him in 5 minutes, he would order them to coupe tete, brûler écailles, cut heads and burn the houses down. He said so. Christos said the same thing. Patron, whose father was a white man, said the same thing. To somebody, all of us could live happily in peace, integrate and happy. That was his undoing. That's why he died sorrowfully. A great general, a great military leader. He died sorrowfully in a jail in France, in the Jouet Mountains. This is the lesson that is as much relevant today as it was then. When we learn that lesson, I'm not saying that we can isolate ourselves. I have never said that. What I'm saying is that we must take control of our affairs. When we take control of our affairs, we don't only take control of outside, we take control of those inside that we have to put to death if necessary. The Mobutus and so on should be put to death. When we can control, we don't have, what is happening? They're talking about the army in Haiti. The only way that we can stop that army from doing that is for the people in the Caribbean region and African peoples everywhere to put a stop to it. Not the OAS. The OAS cannot do it. The UN cannot do it. The UN is a puppet of Republican governments, and now it's going to be a puppet of Democratic governments. So the UN cannot do anything. The UN is impotent. As impotent is my just as well dead as far as Africa is concerned. And the structure of the UN needs a whole heap of upheaval and restructuring again if it's going to have any meaning. We want to have, I put it straight, a black agenda. Get rid of the IMF. Get rid of the World Bank. Get rid of these things. We can't do it together. Drop it, forget it, and let us die together.
You have to speak up.
You have to speak louder. I have two questions. Second, Dr. Clarke, about the turmoil that's happening right now. Wait, with SAAMR, the United States right now. Iraq right now. The United States thinking about going into bomb that country again. This state of American combat.
The question has to do with the U.S. Positioning itself to attack Iraq again. What's your opinion?
If you understood the geography, you understand Africa's relationship to it. And if you read a book called When Africa Ruled the East, you know that what we call Western, I call Western Asia, and other people mistakenly call the Middle East, was a part of Africa, was originally a part of Africa. If you look at the geography of Israel and the creation of Israel, that was really created as an outpost for Western colonialism, you understand that America wants everything in that area to either submit to it or be destroyed. It wasn't enough that they destroyed his country, and they just want him to submit or destroy it. They want to deny a man the right to fly planes over the territory of his own country, and they want to tell a man what to do within the borders of his own sovereign nation, which is utterly outrageous. It's against international law, against national law. But they're doing it because they're the new gangsters of the world, and they're going to get away with it because they've got enough propaganda to convince people that they're supposed to get away with it.
Next question. This side.
I have a question for Dr. Clarke, and I was going to ask a question of the sister that she left. Dr. Clarke said that we have some of the best trained people. You said that we have some of the best. You said that we have some of the best trained people and that they won't even use their technology for African people.
Yes, I said they could. I didn't say they would.
Okay, but I was to ask you, we need an ideology to base and to direct our action. Because if you do not have an ideology to direct your action, then you will have Africans using technology for their enemy when they think they're using it for their own benefit. And I contend that, I was just going to ask you, what ideology do you think that African people should use or have to direct
That's
action?
the same thing I'm saying. Ideology is like nationalism. Now, let's take the case of Colin Powell. Colin Powell is a Jamaican. Colin Powell is a Jamaican who came from the Bronx. He's of the Light Brigade, and he had a habit in high school calling black people black bastards, which is a contradiction in terms. Because in which the word black bastard means mix. If you're black, that means you're not mixed. Be that as it may, let's deal with Colin Powell, the Jamaican in Panama, grinning and smiling. Now let's deal with Panama. Over 5,000 Caribbean people died building Panama. At least 4,000 were Jamaicans. An American general of Jamaican descent goes to Panama as conqueror. He should go to proclaim Panama as the property of the Jamaicans who died building the damn ditch. But you think he would do that? No sense of history, no sense of his own people. No sense of how to proclaim what his own people's blood had already paid for. Without an ideology, you're going to do what your master tells you to do. If Colin Powell was asked to lead an army into South Africa, I don't think he'd hesitate. So the technology we've got and how we will use it will depend not only on the ideology, but a perspective and belief. I said this is what we could do. After World War II, the United States discharged some of the best trained soldiers in the world. We could have gone to Africa and developed air forces, communication systems. We could have given Africa a genuine army, not a bunch of thugs bringing off coups. But did we do it? We didn't have the ideology, didn't have the connection. And besides, the African mind wasn't even trained to let us do it, even if we wanted to do it. So I was putting forth an idea and a possibility that could have happened. And for it to happen, not only the black American needed an ideology, but the African needed a Pan-African ideology also. And they needed to effect a wedding between those two ideologies to make it possible.
Another question?
You had said to your response to someone's question that power means money, corporations, and standing armies. And I wanted some clarification on that because
I think Professor Scobie said that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't mean you. I meant Scobie. But my opinion and my belief from my studies is that politics is a determinant factor for power and not money and corporations. Because if I'm in control of the political machinery, I can dictate what economic systems are present in a society, and I can dictate what forms an army takes, and not the converse. So if you can clarify that.
Please don't misunderstand me. I was not talking about the conquerors at all. They're not even in my thinking at all. I was talking about our own people. What I meant, when you talk about politics, I'm talking about politics of the people, grassroots politics. This is where it comes from. I am not looking to the overseers, the people who, the mulatto overseers, who have been there to caretake for those people who took over those islands, those countries, those continents. I'm talking about the grassroots. And we have, when we build this grassroots, we build and we get the strength, not only to the strength of the unity of our people, but we get the strength also from the resources we have and how we use the resources to give us the power and the strength to be able to feed, clothe, and educate our people without having to see them on television screens with bloated stomachs and staring eyes and dying, our poor, beautiful children. We're tired of seeing that. I've been seeing that for 30 years with the UNICEF since I've been in England. I don't see why children, it's about time we stop being a party to that, a party in the sense that we are not a vibrant leading party. We are playing a kind of role that is being led. This is what I mean, the control of all that we have. When you control what you have, you are wealthy, you are strong. This is what I'm talking about. People do not invade you. And I want again to bring to the notice what is very important and what is very, very dangerous. No one country should be so strong that it can go into another country, take out someone, a person of that country, and bring them to whether it's the United States to be tried for any kind of crime. That has to be stopped. This is what I mean. And the other thing I want to remind ourselves about, we are proud. We talk about Sheikh Anta Diop all the time. How he was a great man and how he opens doors for us. Yes, he did. He did something great, like Dr. Clarke and the others have done. But you know one thing? We never seem to talk about Dr. Diop when he talks about the uniting of Africa. We never seem to place any importance. They say, oh, he's crazy. What do you think about how can he do it? And this man with a tremendous, brilliant mind, as a scientist, as a historian, as an archaeologist and anthropologist, this man showed us where our origins began. He was one of the men who pioneered along those lines, Dr. Clarke and the others. We accept that and we're proud about it. Why aren't we talking when he has written a book and gave us the details of how Africa can unite together? Why don't we talk about that as well? Why do we dismiss him? It's about time those of us who read the book go back and read it again and see what he's talking about. Because if he's brilliant in one thing, he's also brilliant in other words. He knows exactly that is the only salvation. It is all well and good to talk about our glorious past. But we want a glorious present and a glorious future. That is what we want.
Take one last question, and then I want to...
The culture unity. What's the name of the book? Well, the culture unity of Black Africa.
The name of the book is The Cultural Unity of Africa, of Black Africa. I'm sorry. Well, there is no other kind, my brother.
It's a slight
about Black Africa.
Something you should really read. You should all read it again.
Chinese or whatever have their own particular secret society in which all things spring from. Their economics, their philosophy, their politics, and everything. In all the books that I've read by all the gentlemen here, and I haven't read everything, my conclusion is we as black people from wherever, as African descendants, should also have our own particular secret society. Every different Caucasian race in this country that started this country has their particular secret society. Irish have theirs, the Italians have theirs. If we're from West Indies, South Carolina, wherever, we should all have our secret societies that can work in unity together. I'd just like to have the gentlemen's, both of their
suggestions.
I believe we need to have societies, of course, and I don't separate Caribbean people from African American. Everybody's had good societies, and I think we need our societies where we would discuss those things relevant to us, that not the business of other people. And there were times when we had societies that did that. Prince Hall called the Black Masons the African Lodge, and that's what it was. Richard Allen called the church the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and that's what it was. So we already had, in many forms, what you are advocating. Only right now it's a little ragged and a little sloppy, but to some extent we still have it. I think people need to talk to each other. For the survival of people, they need societies separate and distinct from that of other people. So I have no argument about what you're saying.
I want to thank Brother Clarke, but before we have one final speaker before we wind the program down. There's another question there?
It's a much needed question. It's in order. I not only think we need discipline, but I have said over the years, you cannot lift the people from a lower to a higher position. Some form of discipline. I not only believe in discipline, I believe in accountability. I believe in leadership accountability, which is another form of discipline. I think the leader should account to the followers, as well as the followers should account to the leader. And there should be some form of discipline if we don't take care of the assignments that we have.
Which takes punitive action for people who do not live up to, or I don't know, do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
A lot of leaders, a lot of people, power brokers are actually afraid of new ideas, and they're most afraid of students, and students who have inquired into books and foreign magazines and lectures outside of their own countries. And I think this is individual fear of new ideas. And this has not only stagnated Guyana, it has stagnated the whole Caribbean area. Now, Professor Keith Henry of Buffalo wrote a PhD thesis called Meek Moses at Home and Tigers Abroad, dealing with the Caribbean mind away from home and the inability of Caribbean radical ideas to develop at home. This is why the finest of the Caribbean radicals develop best away from home. I said in a speech in 87 in Jamaica, if Marcus Garvey were in Jamaica today with the same ideas, some disranged Jamaican might stone him to death. I still believe that. I wasn't trying to be funny. I think every government in the Caribbean is conservative, sloppy conservative at that. I think every government in the Caribbean afraid of new ideas, afraid of innovative ideas. The most hopeful sign I saw in my last visit to Jamaica is that there are some young Jamaicans born in England who were told that by virtue of being born in England, didn't make them British citizens. They are returning with a vengeance. They're deciding that they've got to have some space in this world that they can call their home. They're returning to the islands of their parents who went to England to work during the war and after the war. The ideas are sharp. Their temperament is uncompromising. If there's a new radical Caribbean of tomorrow, I think it might come from these young people if they're not killed soon enough.
At this point, I'd like to invite Brother Richard Green, who is the director of the Center for Crown Heights Youth Collective, one of the few institutions which is attempting to concretize some of the ideas that we've been talking about here this evening. Oh, it's standing right there. I'm looking for it. Brother Richard Green. I want to thank you for the opportunity, and well, let's hear what goes on.
Okay, I'd like to thank some more, and most of all, I'd like to say that to have Dr. Clarke and Dr. Scobie and the other African world historians here with us this afternoon sort of gave greater validity to our institution. One of the things you see, I invite everyone that hear about the Youth Collective, or hear about Richard Green, or hear about Crown Heights, to come to the Youth Collective. We've been doing this for 14 years, before August 19, 1991, when the tragedy happened around Gavin Cato. This institution is one that we have set up to set new standards in this city, to set new standards in the African world. That when our young people, as you see the young children that run around this center, that pretty much run this operation, we're setting them up for the 21st century. And I think these historians have told us in no uncertain terms that we have a baton that we have to pass on this evening. We've had a rich legacy, but the legacy begins today. If we had to rebuild the legacy of the African world tradition, what are we doing to add to that legacy? And that's our mission here at the Youth Collective. If anyone is interested in any part of this activity here, we ask you to come again. We ask you to not just not come when we have activities, but come at any time. We always need tutors, we always need counselors, we always need help to let these young people know that they're precious and they have a rich legacy. But we not only tell them they have a rich legacy, we have to help them to live it. So what I say is our deeds must represent our creeds. And this evening I'd like to ask each and every one of you to not make this your first or your last visit. Make sure you come again. And again, I'd like to just thank these African world historians for coming here this evening. Thank you all. God bless.
We have videotapes, some of the videotapes from previous programs on sale here. If you talk to the Yusef and others who are recording up front here. Thank you for coming out. You'll have to listen out. We'll have to let you know.
Blacks hate blacks. It's not just a myth. Why is it we do not have the same respect for members of our race as we do for some other race, especially the white race? And that we were told, quite to the contrary, that we were from a land of savages, of cannibals. And except by the grace of God and the white man, we would have been a lost people. So we should be on our knees forever praying and thanking God that we were brought, even in slavery, to this land to escape the horrors of Africa. And this was brought in and drilled into us generation after generation.
Africa, the second largest continent, is an area of almost 12 million square miles in size. It is comprised of 50 independent countries and populated by over 537 million people who speak over 1,000 languages and dialects. For eons, Africa's wealth has been a magnet that has attracted the entire world. The continent has been plundered for its vast mineral and human resources. Traditional historians have viewed this land as one of primitive savages who slept through the millennia, contributing little to the cultural legacy of mankind. The facts, however, tell a different story. Scholars and scientists now concede that Africa is the birthplace of mankind. Africans were the first builders of civilization. They discovered mathematics, invented writing, developed sciences, engineering, medicine, religion, fine arts, and built the Great Pyramids, an architectural achievement which still baffles modern science. What caused the cradle of the world's oldest and greatest civilizations to crumble, leaving in its wake a people who are exploited, oppressed, and economically underprivileged? In a moment, Africa's downfall.
Tony Brown's Journal is brought to you by Pepsi-Cola Company and your local Pepsi bottlers.
Dr. Williams, it's an honor being able to meet with you and to talk with you. You have written what many of us consider to be the definitive work about the culture of Africans throughout the world, and you approach it from the standpoint of the destruction of that civilization. Why did you choose the aspect of destruction rather than some other point of view?
The aspect of destruction was emphasized for the reason that it was quite clear that the black people in America seemed to be generally unaware that they had a history, that they were told that they had achieved nothing. They were told.
This man says the true facts are to be found in a more thorough and honest look at history. After Dr. Chancellor Williams, a native of Bennettsville, South Carolina, received his doctorate in history and sociology, he studied psychology, anthropology, archaeology, and economics. He also taught Arabic history and worked as a professor of history at Howard University for 29 years. He won an award from the Black Academy of Arts and Letters and was the first recipient of the 21st Century Foundation's Clarence L. Holt Prize for Excellence in Literature.
Now, of course, the record was there to show that much of Western civilization was built upon the foundation of the land where civilization itself had begun, and this was in Africa. Therefore, the focus had to be on Africa to see to what extent the recent revelations with the turn of the century, at the turn of the century, that Africa was the cradle of civilization. To what extent could this be actually verified? And so my work was directed in the uncovering much of what had been lost, much of what had been disguised, much of what had been stolen, refurbished, reworked, and presented to Western civilization as the work brought from Africa, but presented to Western civilization as the creation of Western man.
Dr. Chancellor Williams spent 16 years writing his book, and although a piece of extraordinary research, he considered it a greater miracle that he was able to get it published. Plagued by a chronic lack of funds and turned down by his academic associates and all other sources, Dr. Williams mortgaged his home. Then another obstacle arose. Due to his rapidly failing eyesight, he was forced to abandon his earlier plans for an expanded 3-volume work and had to settle for a condensed version of his research into a single volume, the book we now know as The Destruction of Black Civilization, Great Issues of a Race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD.
What did you find out about ancient African civilizations?
Well, to begin with, I found out that ancient African civilization was, first of all, the beginning of civilization. I found out that there could be no record found anywhere that antedates the advanced civilization of Africa. And this was the finding of European and other scholars. And they were now gradually admitting it, and when the evidence became overwhelming, the question arose, could Africans have achieved all this? Could Africans have achieved this remarkable work in architecture that could be traced back for thousands of years before Christ, before Western civilization had even started? Could Africans have done this? Could Africans have achieved this high advance in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry, in medicine, and so forth? I mean, many of the things we now glorify as modern. Take the Washington Monument, for example, which is an exact duplication of ancient African architecture, which is well known. And most of the columns we see on these stately columns on buildings, which the Greeks, in studying in Africa, are borrowed from the Africans, remodeled them at Doria, at Corinth, and so forth, gave these columns the name of the city in which they remodeled them, and gave them a Greek character. They really didn't do much changing. They merely removed the Africa and the canthus leaf at the column and modified, but otherwise it was substantially the same as African.
Dr. Williams, were there ever laws and rules that governed the entire continent of Africa?
There were laws and rules that governed the entire continent in the same sense that you have the same system of laws and rules that which govern a whole people without the same time having a single government, a single state spreading over a whole continent, the second largest in the world. In other words, I'm saying that while Africa, in contradistinction to being a country, was the second largest continent on earth, and while the African people at one time in history occupied the whole continent, And while they were one people in their general culture, in their general religion, with certain modification, in their general social laws, in their general legal system, right on down the line, in almost every avenue you could find that there was this kinship. The only thing that they fundamentally different, or where they fundamentally differed, was where, of course, when they divided up and formed separate states, or withdrew, or to form separate societies, and developed different languages from the segmentation or separation from what had been a larger language group, so that there's no problem at all in understanding that you had one people occupying the continent without being under one single state.
Dr. Williams, based on your research of history, is it accurate that democracy was born in Greece?
No, democracy was not born in any one place. The record, as I indicate in this discussion on the chapter dealing with the African Constitution, birth of democracy, meaning birth of democracy in Africa, I made it quite clear that democracy was a system that was natural among the ancient peoples in all stages of development. Even the most primitive societies had their chiefs generally elected, and the chiefs were generally subject to the will of the group. So it was nothing unusual about the head of the society being subject to the will of the tribe, which was one of the early forms of social organization. The family, the clan, the tribe, the nation is the progressive step. So that in Africa, you will find that back from times immemorial, they had their own system of democracy. And it was this same system which could be found in every part of the African continent. The same fundamental laws, the same fundamental custom. No matter whether they were 5,000 miles apart, no matter whether the group had never come across the other group, they had the same system. That's why we know that we were dealing with substantially one people. So that democracy then was so long, so many thousands of years before Greece, that the mention of Greece in connection with where democracy began could only bring smiles to the face of any scholar who has really studied world history.
What were some of the specific African cultures, civilizations?
These civilizations, I refer to them, of course, generally as the great kingdoms and the great or the empires that existed all over the continent of Africa. To the south, perhaps the greatest, at least one of the greatest, was the empire of Monomotapa, of which the present Zimbabwe is a part of what was once a much larger empire, And then, of course, those empires of Mali and of Ghana, ancient Ghana, and of Shanghai, and of the Marsi states, and so on. Yet many of these countries had started in a period long before Christ was born. Ghana, for example, had for over 400 kings listed before Christ was born. So that these were ancient empires. The most important thing here, though, to note about these empires and our last name is that all the people in America, all the blacks or Africans in America, came from this area of great nations, of a great educational system, where the greatest university of the time in which these slaves were being brought to America still was flourishing in its glory. That is, of course, the University of Sankore. The great civilizations in Nigeria, all of these were advanced cultures. So these people didn't come, as they were told and came to believe after they had lost memory of their homeland by the system of not allowing people of the same language group to be sold to the same plantation, but scattering them all over the South so that you wouldn't form a power base by having a lot of Africans speaking the same language. So this helped by this breakdown of intercommunication among themselves, helped them to lose memory. But we were told, quite to the contrary, that we were from a land of savages, of cannibals. And except by the grace of God and the white man, we would have been a lost people. So we should be on our knees forever praying and thanking God that we were brought, even in slavery, to this land to escape the horrors of Africa. And this was brought in and drilled into us generation after generation. Until even today, after we're going through from the kindergarten through graduate school, the majority of blacks today reject the idea of being called an Afro-American.
Dr. Williams, if all of the things you say are true, if Africans had such advanced civilizations, hundreds of kings in one African kings in one kingdom before Jesus Christ was born, how did Africans worldwide and Afro-Americans get in the shape they're in? How did these great kingdoms, this great civilization, fall to civilizations that didn't come along until thousands of years after theirs were already established?
Well, it wasn't done overnight. Their great empires were built through their industry, through their enterprising, through their industry in so many fields. The whole societies, as I point out in the book, in practically all of them, were organized in lodges. This is where the organization of workers, but they regard themselves as craftsmen. And each working group, whether it's building boats, or whether they were stone masons or brick masons, or whether they were carpenters or whatnot, each craft was organized into a lodge. In fact, the educational system was similarly organized on a basis of 3 levels. And so you had a society that went in for production. The people who were specialized in growing rice or cotton or peppers or what have you did so not as Africans do today. Africans hardly get Africans generally today to go beyond the subsistence level. Just enough for themselves, as though they're scared to produce a surplus for export and to sell the areas which do not produce the same things which they produce, and buy from the other people the things which the other people produce and which they don't have, which is trade, which is progress, which is the basis of wealth worldwide. See, what they're talking about, Reaganism and that sort of stuff, there isn't anything new. The Africans were doing that tens of thousands of years ago, a system of light. So they had regular trading posts establishing different villages in other countries. They had trading routes that crossed the Sahara into other lands with merchandise, camels loaded with merchandise of spices, whatever the people produced. They were an industrious people. And they sold, and they would import as well as export. And this is what made them great. I try to emphasize that when you talk about the great African empires, they didn't just become great overnight, just great. No, they became great by doing specific things. They were great people. They were industrious people. They were builders. They were producers. The whole nation was fired to produce, and they were rewarded for their work. And so they built cities and so forth and so forth. And so this is why you had this great system of nations building becoming so mighty. Now, why did they fall? They fell when this began to decline internally, and when the forces, the external forces, over centuries of effort, finally gained the day. These nations had strict laws barring foreigners from coming to the interior. Then the same system of gradually settling around the borders, that is foreign traders, and supposed to be traders, but most of them were geographers and others representing foreign, would establish little trading posts, just ask for permission to establish trading posts on the border. We don't want to come in, we don't come in, we just want to do business with you. We want to sell you what we have, we want to buy some of what you have. Well, the Africans are great traders, always great traders. So that was one of the weaknesses. They allowed them to settle along the borders, for one thing. The second thing that happened, and this went on, as I point out in the destruction, for several thousand years before the certain countries were finally taken. And when they were taken, like Egypt, look how many times Egypt was taken and retaken.
You say blacks gave up Egypt. Are you saying the Egyptians were black?
Of course the Egyptians were black. The name comes from the name itself, has an origin in the name of a black king. So that it became, the Egyptians were black until it became otherwise. They're not black today, and they're just like those who occupy the northern part of the Sudan are not black today. They are partly Arab, mostly Arab, and some of them are mixed, the Afro-Arabs, you might call them.
You spend quite a bit of time in your book describing the ancient civilization of Ethiopia. What is it you find important about that civilization?
Well, the ancient civilization of Ethiopia was the civilization of what we're now talking about when we talk about that whole stretch of land from the Mediterranean to the source of the Nile, which was ancient Ethiopia. So Egypt was nothing but what we call Egypt now, which was Chem, before the name was changed, was nothing but a northern province of the Ethiopian Empire.
You have a chapter here, Ethiopia's oldest daughter, Egypt. And I'd like to read you a statement you made and get you to comment on it. You say, the melting pot of the races began around the northern perimeter. The end result was always the same. The blacks were pushed to the bottom of the social, economical, and political ladder, whenever and wherever the Asians and their mulatto offsprings gained control. Why is that? Why if with this advanced African civilization, when they interfaced with members of other groups, why did the members of that civilization always end up on the bottom of the ladder?
We have always been, as I repeatedly point out, the race of brotherhood seekers. We have been the one who forever have carried on the drive for brotherhood with other people. They have never sought brotherhood with us, never, except for expediency, where they saw an opportunity to play the role of big brother for a while they gain effective control. Now, they're cunning, you see. They study us, and they know this. They have certain basic advantages. They can easily win our confidence, first of all, because Africa, the whole continent of Africa, was known as the land of the religious people. We didn't start all this religion in America, you know, being more religious than the whites. No, this is an African characteristic. We were known from ancient time as the land of the spiritual people, the land of the gods, because we were so religious. The blameless people, Homeless wrote. We were so religious. So this must be kept in mind in this general appraisal.
How significant was the oral historian in the reconstruction of African history?
Well, the oral historian was indispensable if you're going to make a comparative study of history, in which you're going to compare what had been written, and since it's always written by foreigners, with what the Africans themselves had written in the records of their mind, and the records of their mind turned out to be as accurate and as unerring in many respects as what is written in books.
For a transcript, send $2 to Tony Brown Productions, 1501 Broadway, Suite 2014, New York, New York, 10036. Please include program topic and allow 3 weeks for delivery. Tony Brown Productions produces this program and is solely...
We're trapped. We know no way out. So we get a wine bottle. We get a whiskey bottle. Or we stick a needle in our arm. Or we smoke pot. Trying to find an escape from the hell that the white man has given us for 400 years here in America. So this is a false escape. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is offering a real escape. You don't have any boats for airplanes bringing drugs into this country. The white man brings it in. The white man brings it to Harlem. The white man makes you a drug addict. The white man then puts you in jail when he catches you using drugs.
In the middle 60s, the drugs essentially, early 60s was controlled by the organized mob, okay? Organized criminals controlled it.
The fact that a decision was made, and I think most of you familiar with the broadcast of the mafia defector who went on public media to declare what happened and outline in great detail the great plan of how to destroy the black youth of the nation, starting in New York. He said in a meeting 20 miles outside of New York City, the great decision was made. He said he didn't have to guess about it, and those who heard him know that I'm quoting him almost verbatim, because he was there. And the decision was to concentrate the distribution of drugs on the black youth of the nation, starting in New York. Starting in New York, beginning in the elementary school, and that to punish, even on the pain of death, any of the distributors who invaded the white community or predominantly white schools. That New York and other large cities were to be divided up into districts. The district commander, black, was to be given any kind of car he wanted, Mercedes, Rolls Royce, anything, because this would be a part of the sales pitch. Said blacks just love fine cars, and he'd drive around through the community in his fine car, and some of his key assistants, and he'd be identified, he'd be known, and that sort of stuff. And so the stories, I'm not going any further into it, but thus it began, and the spread over the country, and we fell for it. Now, one thing was important, that the thing to attract the blacks, more than any other thing, more than the drug itself, but to spread the word, have a number of key young people in it, and to spread the word that this is the end thing, so that'll get them. Just say it's the end thing, and they'll brave the fires of hell to be a part of the end thing.
Smoking marijuana was more or less like a team.